Hello and welcome to the Catholic Art Institute podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Carr, and I'm so pleased today to be joined by Jonathan Pageau, icon carver, internet sensation, friend of Jordan Peterson. If you don't know who Jonathan Pageau is, I've not been on the internet and certainly not on YouTube. I'm just so delighted. Thanks for taking the time today, Jonathan.
It's my joy. I'm happy to be here.
Um, I really want to start at the beginning because I think it would be good if people understood your artistic training, your faith journey, because I think that faith journey also has informed your interest in symbolism and then your work doing the podcasting. So just share a little bit about that, your artistic journey, your faith journey, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
So I grew up. So I'm from Quebec. So French is my first language, and my parents converted from Catholicism to evangelical Christianity, and so for them it was really like a discovery, a faith journey for them. Kind of a discovery of authenticity. And so I grew up in that milieu, let's say. I was interested in art from a very young age. But there was always in visual art, let's say, there was always something a little bit iffy about being a kind of Baptist visual artist. There wasn't an active hostility, I would say, against the arts, but there was kind of an implicit suspicion, let's say. But I always pretty much knew I was going to be an artist. And when I went to college, I really had a faith crisis, I would say, on several fronts. One was being a Protestant evangelical and at the same time making visual art. The second was being just a Christian making contemporary art. And so all of these were really kind of clashing together because I wanted to take it seriously. I didn't want to just surf through. And so I was trying to understand what contemporary art was and what it meant to create these works as someone who wanted to make something authentic. And it was really hard because contemporary art is a cynical deal. Contemporary art, there's something about contemporary art which is always a comment upon a comment upon a comment. And there's something about it which is always kind of a joke or an inside joke. And so I really struggled. I struggled so much that my art became about that. So it's like the art I was making was about the problem of a Christian making contemporary art and about a Protestant making art. And it was just rather this kind of just it was I thought I was being very deep, but I was just being just this, it was kind of this self-reflective silliness that I was engaged in so much that I did really well in school. I finished first in my class, but then the teacher, the professor that was kind of guiding me through, that was the head of the program, at the very end when I was finishing, said, what are you doing here? Like, you don't belong here. And she said something like, you should go to seminary or something. And it's funny because I was in my early 20s, so I was so cocky that it just kind of rolled off my back, and I was like, whatever. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But it turns out, strangely, that she was right. Even though I don't know if she for the right reasons. And so this crisis really kind of grew and grew in my life in terms of this problem. And this is what ultimately led to orthodoxy, which is that once I discovered traditional Christian art and once I discovered kind of the medieval language of art, I really fell in love with the possibilities that it offered. One, to be authentic. Two, to express my faith. And three, just this integrated language of symbolic images that I found out it's what I was really looking for when I was creating contemporary art. So I was trying to do it on my own. I was creating these images that would use would let it condense biblical stories into symbols and try to juxtapose them in paintings and stuff. And so it's kind of absurd. And so really that's one of the aspects that led me to discover traditional Christianity and traditional art.
I think that happens for a lot of us when we're in art college. Sort of a similar thing in my case. Really uncatechized Catholic growing up, but being really drawn to that same genre of art. When you're in your basic art history classes, and then you don't understand the symbolism and other things. Plus, you're confronted with this kind of aesthetic relativism that I call it, where I'm the maker, I'm the own god of my own whatever, and whatever I say it is art, and even if it looks like scribbling, so then you do find yourself becoming sort of like you're encouraged to be ironic and that kind of thing. But
And there's
yeah,
something about irony, which is it's as a Christian, it's really poison for your soul, because if you especially once you understand what traditional art was, like what a traditional image would do, which is that it wasn't a comment about something, like it was an image of something. So you make an image of Christ, and this image of Christ is not a political statement. It's not a comment upon other people who made that type of art. It's a participation in a language. And then that image of Christ is given to a community, right? It's put up in a church. It's used by someone to remember what's important for them, and so it actually is an art which participates in the life of others. And contemporary art is so ironic, not only ironic in its themes, but also ironic in its function. It doesn't have a social function. It's basically this fetishized object which you put up on a wall and you look at, but it doesn't have a place in reality except for maybe giving you some prestige, or maybe all the best thing a contemporary art can do is decorate. Like that's the best thing it can do, is decorate and then give you some prestige, be an investment object that you can make money off of or that you can impress your friends with. But it's very different from what traditional art used to do. And it's part of discovering not just the language, internal language of art, I would say, of traditional art, but it's also the entire language, that is even the objects themselves, what it is to create an object in an authentic way, what it means to make something that has a place in the world, that justifies its position in the world by being used by a community and entering into the life of people.
yeah, that's really well stated. Because after all, why do you want to spend your life making things that are snarky and ironic? It's a dead end for artists. I mean, and that's why I think it's good to have these conversations to redirect artists that can get lost. I mean, you get into a, regular art college and it's all this postmodern philosophy and it's very easy to get lost. And I think it just leads to nowhere, inside of yourself as an artist, when you have that call that's for
Mm.
others and to make something, to embody something that's a vehicle of grace.
Yeah.
Okay, so you found the Orthodox tradition. How did you end up learning to carve icons? Because your work is remarkable, like really beautiful work. How did that? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So it's a when I became a catechumen in the Orthodox Church, I was desperate to paint icons because, first of all, I was a painter in my training. I'd studied painting and drawing in school, and so I thought, like, I found this is it. Like, this is it for me. But at the time, it's better now. But at the time, in the early 2000s, it was actually quite difficult to find a teacher. Icon teaching. I'm sorry.
I said I can imagine.
Yeah, it was very difficult to find someone, and it was difficult to improvise yourself as an icon painter because it's very technical. There's a lot of detail. You don't want to miss the subtleties of what is going on in the painted icon, and also because it's egg tempera and it's very complicated in terms of technique and stuff. And as a contemporary artist who like painted only in acrylic, obviously I had no sense of technical skill. So, so then while I was there, I was studying. I would go to the library and just like get these stacks of books and just go through all these traditional images, trying to gain a language, you could say, in terms of iconology, not the practice. So in that moment, my parents cut down a tree in their yard, and it was a basswood linden tree. And they told me, "Hey, Jonathan, we hear this wood is good for carving. Would you like to have some pieces and kind of try it out?" And right away, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a cross. Like, I'm going to make a blessing cross with an image of Christ on it. So they gave me this piece of wood, and I had no idea what I was doing. I basically had X-Acto knives. That's what I had as as tools. And so I made the entire cross, like even the shape of the cross with X-Acto knives, which is completely insane when I think of it now. Like, I didn't even saw it. I was like going at it with these X-Acto knives. And so I carved this thing, and I keep it. I still have it. It's like a testimony to my very humble beginnings, let's say. So it was pretty horrible, but it was like I really made the effort. Like, I really did it. And I brought it to church, and I remember someone that was there who's kind of with me said, "Show it to the priest." I showed it to the priest. So they showed it to the priest, and the priest is like, hey, you should keep going. You should keep doing this. So then on my birthday, once again, my parents bought me this like little carving kit, and I said, okay, so I'm gonna do it for real this time. And so I bought these wooden panels, and then I made a full-on like icon with Christ on a throne with like the four cherubs, and the Mother of God and St. John the Foreigner next to him, like this intense image. It took me months and months to make. And then when I brought it to church when I was finished, and then when the priest saw it, he said, "Okay, you definitely need to continue doing this." And so that was the beginning. And then through a lot of turns and detours in my life, I also lived in Africa for 7 years and worked with traditional artisans there. And also working with artisans in Africa really helped me to see the grounded aspect of art, like this like making objects for people, and this idea of just the real practicality of it, and not in this heady space that I had been in college. And while I was there, I lived in Kenya, and I discovered this stone, which is like a soapstone, but it's a very light colored soapstone. They call it Kisi stone. And when I saw that stone, I just fell in love with it. I really fell in love with the stone, and I lived in one of the villages where they carved that stone for several months. And some of the people there taught me how to carve the stone, and that's how it really started. So I brought some stone back from Kenya to Canada, and I started to carve in my spare time. And then after a while, I started getting orders and commissions from my bishop first, and then from different people. And at some point, I realized that this was the thing in front of me. Like, I had a commission, so I did it, and then I had another commission, and I did it, and another, and another, and another, and I never stopped. And that was, like almost 10 years ago now.
Wow, that's amazing. So, because I don't work in the Orthodox tradition, I wasn't sure if this soapstone carving was, because I've never seen other icons that you like, the ones that you've made. So it was your trip to Africa. Wow. That's amazing.
But it's a traditional. So before the Constantinople fell to the Turks, the Byzantine tradition had a soapstone carving tradition, and so
they did. Okay.
Yeah, so there was a specific type of soapstone that was in Anatolia, and it had a kind of light greenish color, and so it was actually quite precious. Some people surmise that it was actually more precious than ivory for the Byzantines, and so they had this whole tradition of soapstone carving. But that fell away when Constantinople fell because they didn't have access to the stone anymore. And so then it kind of went to the wayside, but it's still there. If you can look up, online, you can find these soapstone carvings that were there in the Middle Ages. And so I'm kind of reviving that tradition, continuing that tradition. Also, obviously, I'm using also kind of the aesthetic of ivory carving in my soapstone as well. So it's not just soapstone carving, it's just miniature carving, ivory carving. But obviously, at the same time, it's tradition. Tradition is not nostalgia. It's not about copying ancient things. And so I'm also creating new types of images within that material, within that style, using different techniques as well.
Yeah, reminds me of Duncan Stroik's quote, because he's a traditional architect, and that we make grandchildren is sort of how he put it, which I thought was kind of a beautiful thing. So you're borrowing, you're building upon, it's, you look like your grandparents in ways you can, but, it's something new altogether.
Yeah, it's really a language. The best way to understand it is that it's a language. And so a language is not stifled. A language has certain parameters, but it also has an immense flexibility. And so it's like you recognize that it's part of this language, but it's not just a copy of something in the past. Just like a sonata has a structure, you can recognize a sonata, but sonatas are not just copies of each other. They just participate in a language, in a pattern.
Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking of the Orthodox priest that won our Sacred Art Prize 2020, Father Ciliano Justiniano.
He won? That's amazing.
Yeah, he got first prize. Yeah.
That's awesome. He totally deserves it. He's one of the best. He's one of the best artists. Like, he's one of the best artists in America, I think. Like, he just not. I love Father Ciliano. He's like, I have a giant image, a drawing of his that I traded for one of my drawings, and I have it up in my living room. It's of St. Mamet sitting on a lion. He's such an amazing draftsperson. So congratulations to Father Ciliano. I didn't know. I got an email from him last week, and he didn't even tell me. That's amazing.
Well, you're really busy, and I've been busy, but and I meant to send you the link, but yeah, I interviewed him, and he's a real character too. He's a lively person to interview.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm bringing him up, not only for his an incredible craftsmanship and his handling of the egg tempera paints, is just off the charts. But
Yeah.
he has this way of working within the tradition, but bringing a unique vision to it and something that's fresh. And we discussed this because he had several finalist pieces. So I think it was 4 in total. And then he took the first prize. And so I think you're doing this also with your icons. And so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that, like how you see the tradition, but then also work within it to make it sort of your own, or,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I see it really as an organic process. I kind of tell people, my sense is that innovation is neither good nor bad, and that's really the best way to understand it. It's not the obsession we have with innovation is something, it's like a weird disease that the modern world has, but also the aversion to innovation is something that is not at all traditional in any way, because tradition is this organic kind of process. And so what I'd like to do is I like to go into the tradition, and for me to make the best versions of what I see. And then if I see something even in the modern world, or if I see something in contemporary art, then I'm willing to join it to what I'm doing. But it's always in the serving the purpose. And so if you're submitted to the purpose of the object that you're making, then you're less danger of going astray. If all you want is to draw attention to yourself, if all you want is to surprise people, shock people, do something no one's ever done, then that will completely lead you astray. But if you want to create an object, let's say, that will participate in the liturgical life of people, that when they see it, they recognize, let's say it's an image of Christ, they recognize Christ, and they're not alienated by it. Like they're not either alienated by not recognizing it or being too seduced by it. So there's this like process where you're trying to see how it is that I can create an image that will enter into people's life and enliven it. And so the images that I make, for example, they've never been made before. Like the type of images I'm making are not at all the things people made in the Middle Ages. But if you look at them, you recognize that they're still in that family, right? They still have something of it. But there's no rule, like there's no system. It's just a kind of, if you love the language, if you enter into the language and you love iconography and you love the ancient works, then the synthesis will kind of slowly happen, in themselves. So I'll take like what I think is the best of 11th century ivory carving, but the faces I find are not the best. I prefer, let's say, the way that the Western medieval faces were made. They had a kind of simple beauty to them and a kind of soberness to the faces. And so it's like that'll just happen where I'm going to join these together and create images that people recognize as still being part of the tradition. But I know that I'm even like getting inspiration from, let's say, Ethiopian art in the really the simplicity of the faces, or even Islamic art, in terms of ornamentation, in terms of different things. So, I mean, Father Siddlewan is really great for that too, because he's really able to pull even from kind of contemporary painting. But that's not what jumps out at you, right? That's the difference. It's like when you look at his icon, you don't see, oh, he's influenced by this contemporary painter, but he is. He's just putting that subtly into the story, subtly into the image in a way that will just enliven it, kind of like spice, right? It's like you can add spice to the image, but you don't want your cooking to be, you don't eat spice, right? You don't just eat spice. You have to add these things kind of subtly and beautifully so that it creates this organic whole.
Right. Yeah. It's embellishing it. It's not the big source of what it is. But yeah, what you're articulating is very similar to the conversation I had with Father Ciliano, and it's great, because this is what this organization is trying to do, is show people that this is a living tradition. It can be. How can we learn from the past, carry on, and all of the things you're articulating, making this for others, having as a liturgical means of prayer. That's what our gifts are for. So I'm glad you shared that. I'm going to also put some links in the description, because you have recently been doing YouTube videos showing people the techniques of carving, which is really wonderful, and it's amazing to see it. And here it is coming to life before your eyes. So if people are interested, and I know you have some workshops that people could sign up for once they take in some of these videos if they wanted to study more. So what are you working on now? You know, I saw your interview with Dr. Jordan Peterson recently. I mean, this is a really moving thing that you have this friendship that's been going on for a few years, and it seems to be something God is using. And so apparently he's commissioned you. Are you able to talk about that
Sure, yeah.
commissions that, yeah, because it sounds like he's a very good patron, which is,
Yeah, it's great to have patrons that just tell you make the best thing you've ever made, and so that's
yeah.
what I've been. That's the chance I've had with him. I made an image of Saint Michael slaying the dragon for him, and he the same. He said, "Look, just make the best thing you've ever made." And so it was quite elaborate. You know, using one of the things I do is I have carving, but I also use a different stones as well. So there's stone inserts, different colored stones, and so you see the image is colored, but there's no paint on it. It's just like all the different stones that are colored. And so the images that he's asked me to make now is three images, and so it'll be three images of the Mother of God, of the Theotokos, and so he said just make three images of Mary. So I wanted to make kind of let's say something that encompasses all of her story in relationship to Christ. And so I have an image of the Annunciation, an image of the Panagia we call, which is the Mother of God in prayer with the Christ in her center, where you see the Christ child kind of coming out of her heart, you would say.
Mm.
And then the third one is the Mother of God it's kind of a descent of the cross image, but it's usually it's just her and Christ where she's next to him as he's going into the tomb. And so these three images I'm going to be making for him, and they're going to be quite ornamented, and they'll be a metallic background with stone inserts and such, trying to push it even further from what I've done before.
Is that gilding that you would do in the background? You gild or?
There's gilding, but there's also something called basma, which is a kind of an Orthodox tradition, especially in the Russian tradition, which is that they have these embossed metal plates that have ornaments in them, and so you can use them as these flat backgrounds. You see that in some icons. They put this kind of embossed metal in the background.
Like a Riza. Is that
It's not the same as a Riza. The Riza would actually have the shape of the folds. It would be like it would be like an embossed image of the actual saint with the face cut out to show the face. But the Riza, the Basma is more like an ornamented background, like an ornamented pattern that's in the background.
Well, I think that I can't wait to see them. That's just so fascinating, and that's the perfect way to be a patron, is to let you do what you do best. That's the role. Because I had this conversation with Alexander Stoddard recently, and he said, "You only have great patrons. You don't have great clients, because the client is trying to tell you, and you're not able to give them what you really are called to do." So,
But I really like. I always try to it's hard for me to do it now because like my waiting list is like 2 years right now. But it's like ideally what I like to do is to have very accessible images, like a few $100s that anybody can commission. And so that I make, like it takes me half a day, to produce it. And then there's obviously other little steps, but I like to have those because there's something about and making an image for just a regular person that they can put up and that it's part of their life. In some ways, like that image that I make for like a few $100s that will go into someone's living room might be more precious, to that person than what Jordan Peterson is commissioning for me. I don't know. And so I really like to have a whole range of things that I do where I just like the idea of participating in people's lives and making images so someone who writes me and says, I know, but my nephew is being baptized and I really like a baptismal, have something to give for the baptism. It's like, I love that stuff because I make an image, you get it at your baptism, your whole life, you have this image, with your saint on it and it was part of this celebration. And you think, hey, I did that. Like I have the chance to actually participate in people's life. That's amazing.
yeah, that's beautiful. It's you have a very generous heart, and that's to be admired and emulated, I think. So how did you end up with your podcast series and this? obviously I can see where the Orthodox study and the symbolism and things like that would inform that. So that, because it's really become this whole other thing, I always knew you as the icon carver, but the symbolic world has really taken off and it's amazing. So tell us a little bit about that, if you could.
Well, it's related in the sense that in my 20s, I really did have this spiritual crisis. And it wasn't just me, my brother and I kind of had this moment at the same time where we felt like the Christianity that we had learned about was insufficient, let's say. And it was like bringing us to a breaking point where at some point we're thinking, okay, can I still be a Christian? We're almost like really at that point where I thought like, I can't believe in a lot of this stuff that I'm being given. And that brought about in both of us a desire to search and to read and to try to look for something. And that ultimately led me to read the Church Fathers, especially St. Gregory of Nyssa, St. Maximus the Confessor, and ultimately also St. Ephrem the Syrian, and realizing that the language, and also discovering icons. And so realizing that there was actually this extremely powerful language that was in the liturgical life, in the icons, in the Church Fathers, but ultimately in the Bible. And that this was almost like a map of reality, that the stories in Scripture are talking about how reality unfolds. And that it's not just about describing events, but that there is a sacred language of symbolic understanding, you could say. And in reading St. Gregory of Nyssa and these Church Fathers, I was seeing that this is completely true. And my brother, he went mostly reading rabbinical traditional text and seeing the same kind of pattern that was being exemplified in these texts. And so we developed it kind of down, like just in low key, and in our discussions, we developed a way of thinking about this and a way of talking about it, which we thought could account for modernity, like let's say could be understood by modern people. And but it was always something that I did on my own, and I wrote a little bit in that frame for the Orthodox. So I was writing for a journal called the Orthodox Art Journal, where I would describe icons using that approach. But then it was really Jordan Peterson, who I encountered in 2015, and he listened to one of I heard his lectures first, and I thought there's something in what he's saying that I was close to what I wanted to do. And I could see that there was something in the way he was talking to people that could be an opening for secular people to understand what Christianity was about. And so I reached out to him, and then he listened to one of my lectures, and he thought like, okay, he really saw that there was this connection between the way we talked about things. And then it was his fault. Like he put me on his podcast a few times, and then I started getting a flood of messages from atheists. At some point every day I was getting these messages from atheists asking questions like, where can I learn more about this? Where can I, what does this mean? What does this mean? What's going on here? And I couldn't answer them. Like I couldn't answer all these emails. So I thought, okay, this is happening on YouTube. That's where Jordan Peterson is. And so I started making YouTube videos. And that's how it really started. And at first I thought, okay, I'm going to show people how you can use Scripture, for example, to like interpret movies, let's say. So you can see like that the patterns of Scripture are like the patterns of reality. And they're the same patterns for any story. So fairy tales, anything. But then I realized people really even cared more about learning about Christianity itself. And so the videos that have the most views are not the videos necessarily where I'm talking about popular culture, but where I'm actually kind of talking about the world, the contemporary world and what's going on, and then also talking about Christianity. And so that's really what's going on. And so I would say half of the people that listen to what I'm doing are atheists or are like post-secular types. And it's surprising because I grew up evangelical, and I always told myself I would never evangelize because I was like traumatized by going door to door and knocking on people's doors and telling them that Jesus loved them, and just how silly that was for me. And so I always tell myself like, I'm never going to evangelize people. I can't stand it. But then here I am finding myself in this strange position where I'm like evangelizing people. But I feel like I'm doing it in a way that is just trying to show the power and the beauty of the story and how deep it goes and how it really fills the world, and how Christ and his story is is unbeatable. Like you can't go beyond the story of Christ. And it's an objective thing. It's not like I feel like this or that so I'm talking a lot to cognitive scientists and psychologists and people who understand concepts like emergence and all of these issues that are there, right, in the all the different scholarly fields right now that are problematic, let's say, especially the notion of emergence. And I'm realizing that this is it. Like St. Maximus the Confessor and the Church Fathers offer a technical solution, like a real solution to the problem of the limit that science has reached right now. And so that's the kind of stuff that gets the people around the videos that I'm doing, that gets them kind of excited and wanting to learn more. So it's a strange moment, but it's exciting at the same time.
It is. Well, it's beautiful, and it shows that God uses, I mean, just that whole circle of connection that you have there, how your relationship came. And that's amazing, how you took this inspiration from iconology and the symbolism, but you're also able to, I can see why this works, because I think when there's a veneer of Christianity on things, sometimes people think they know what it is, but they don't at all. But they find themselves attracted to things that are like it in a certain sense, in terms of a religion. I mean, let's see the Star Wars people and Comic-Con and some of this stuff. I mean, Burning Man, this is liturgy. This is, people are trying to find their way in the world, and they've been put off of Christianity because, let's just look at how it's been depicted in, and then you have Christians too, that's oftentimes can be the biggest obstacle. So I think it's amazing. I mean, and I would encourage people to watch your videos, because you do have a gift for this, to unpack and find parallels, with the Christian story, and then just these truisms too. Like Jordan Peterson is very sincere, but he's also full of practical wisdom. And I think it's leading people to the truth, where maybe if something had Catholicism on the front door, they wouldn't even give it a chance. And I think it's just God using that.
Yeah, I always joke with Jordan, like even recently, like the latest discussion we had, you can see how he's struggling, he's hesitating, and it's really like an intense and real struggle that he has.
Yeah.
But if you knew like how many messages I've gotten, and so I just joke with him and I say, Jordan, you're converting people despite yourself. You have no idea. It's like if you only knew like what I'm getting in terms of feedback and reaction. So I always say he's something like King Cyrus, how in the Bible, King Cyrus was this foreign king who told the Jews to go back and build their temple. And so he's kind of like that. He's like, I'm not a Christian, but who knows? I always tell him too that his story is not over. He's still on the path. So, but it's a very interesting moment. It's exciting. It's exciting to see, like I just interviewed a pretty successful novelist, Paul Kingsnorth, on my channel. And same, like for him, he's like, I didn't want to be a Christian. Like I didn't want that. But then here he is, like there now he's been he's been received by the church. And so, but he is also realizing like there's also something in the air. Like there's something happening right now, which it's as if materialism is reaching its limit, and people are reaching, and they're reaching in all kinds of directions. But some of those directions are dead ends. And if you're smart and you have a little bit of sensibility, you realize that like neo-paganism is not a real thing. Like Wicca is not a real thing. All of these New Age things, they're not real. They are just made up, and they have a superficiality to them. And even like what I call California Buddhists, like these kind of New Age modern Buddhists that are not really Buddhists. They're I don't know what they are. Like my Catholic grandmother was more Buddhist than a lot of these Buddhists. And so it's like there's something that, and so you end up
as a cafeteria Buddhist.
Yeah, something like that, a cafeteria Buddhist, like the kind of Buddhist that goes to a spa and then they relax with the statue of Buddha next to them,
Right.
That kind of Buddhist. So anyways, I don't want to make fun of Buddhists too much, but
No, I know.
no, but it's mostly the idea that people are kind of reaching and grasping, and if we can help them see the deep aspect of Christianity, like if we can help them see that a lot of the stuff that it's true that Christianity went off the rails in the past 2 centuries, that it became extremely superficial and materialistic, let's say. It adopted the materialism of its surroundings. And because of that, it ran into a it ran into a strange situation where it was basically accepting materialist ideas, and then putting on top of that this strange story of some guy that was crucified in Judea 2,000 years ago. And it's like those two things just didn't jive together. Whereas there is a very deep mystical tradition in Christianity, which can help you dive into what it is and what Christ is and how Christ connects to, the universal story in terms of meaning, not just in terms of this more superficial vision. So I think it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. You did this nice video recently, The Call to the Christian Artist. I'll put a link below to that. That was very inspiring. Do you have any advice for artists in terms of, the design? Well, to begin with, just artists of today. Any advice of that, and then people who feel called to, sacred art?
Yeah. Well, I would say the one of the most important things that Christian artists need to understand is that Christianity isn't a message. It's not a message you need to get across. That's not what it is. Christianity is an entire worldview. It's an entire web of relationships, of ways of being. And that translates into the work of art, not only in the thing you put on the canvas, but in the very existence of that object, in the very way that you come into making the image. And so it's like the difference between something like Dostoevsky and, the kind of Christian movie that you see in America today. What is it, like God is Dead or whatever, that kind of really superficial vision, where it's like the Christian ethos can imbibe the very form of what you're making, not just use what's there in the world and then slap on top a Christian message. And I think that if people can go into scripture like that and can go into the tradition like that, then the work that will be produced will be far more profound and far more integrated than a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the superficial art that's being made right now. And so that's really, it's like, know the story, not just in terms of the facts, but the story of Christ is the story of everything. So if you can dive into that story and understand how it talks about reality, and live it, then it's going to start to appear in the culture that we produce. And it's going to start to appear in liturgical art, but then also even in secular art too, can be fed by that understanding, or that living it.
Yeah, no question. Well, this has been very inspiring, and what a great conversation. I don't want to take any more of your time because I think we've gone slightly over here, but I can't thank you enough for making the time, for even answering your emails. I can't imagine the volume. So this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you too. I really appreciated the conversation.
No worries. Okay. Well, hopefully we can host you again for another talk. I will put a link below to the talk that you gave to the Catholic Art Guild when it was the Catholic Art Guild, and links to your work and various other things for those that are curious. So thanks again, Jonathan, and hopefully we'll be in touch.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.